in this video we're going to have a look at arrays from one-dimensional all the way to three-dimensional and also lists. So what's actually being covered in this video today? Well, we're going to have a look at arrays 1D, 2D and 3D. We're also going to have a look at lists and their similarities and differences. Now, arrays 3D and lists are A-level exclusive. So if you are here for GCSE knowledge, you will need to watch up to 2D arrays. If you are wanting to go and further your knowledge further, then 3D arrays and also lists are going to be extremely helpful to you. If you are doing A-level, then everything in this video is worthwhile for you to know. So arrays and lists are data structures that can be used when we're creating our programs, and they're both very, very similar, but they do have a distinct difference. So the biggest similarity is that arrays and lists allow a programmer to store multiple values of the same data type under one variable name. So for example, you may have a program that stores 5 scores, and you might have score 1 equals 1, score 2 equals 1, score 3 equals 7, score 4 equals 5. That becomes very, very tedious. Whereas we can have one variable called scores and it can be equal to all those values at the exact same time. Both arrays and lists are 0 based, so they start at index 0 and we move forward from there, and there'll be more information about that as we go through. Finally, arrays are static while a list is dynamic. Now, what we mean by that is when a data structure is static, it means that you set the size of the array at the beginning and it cannot change from there. It stays exactly as it is. Dynamic data structures, on the other hand, can grow and shrink as the data does, which makes it very, very helpful. So let's have a look at arrays. We're going to start at one-dimensional and we're going to move further and further towards three-dimensional as we go along. So like I said before, arrays are 0 based. So if we have a look at, this is a one-dimensional array that I've got here. You can see I've got an array of names. I've got Tom, Brenda, Janet, Peter and Susan all in this array. You can also see that I have put the index at the top. So this is like what slot each element is in. So you can see Tom is in slot 0, Janet's in slot 2, so on, so on. Now, even though there's 5 elements in that array, you can see that the biggest index is 4. And that's just because the first index is 0. So we count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 values, but it only goes up to 4. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at these arrays. So let's have a look at this one-dimensional array using OCR exam reference language. So you can define just an empty array very, very simply. So you can see I've put array names 5. That is a one-dimensional array with 5 slots in. I can then actually define each slot as I go. I'll show you how I do that when we actually program it. But there is enough space there for 5 elements, and I can put them in after or as the user enters them. Alternatively, I can declare an array and put the items in as I go. So you can see I've put array colours equals blue, pink, green. Now it's important to know that the array is then fixed at having a size of 3, or is only able to hold 3 elements. I can change the elements however I wish, but I have only got those 3 elements. So if we have a look in Java, you can see it is practically the same. The only differences is that obviously I have declared the data type at the front here. You can see we use these square brackets when we're dealing with arrays. So I've got string, square brackets to show that it's going to be an array. Names is the name of my array, equals new string 5. So it's a blank array with 5 spaces. Going down to the next example, we've got a string array of colours and I have declared the starting values blue, pink, green. So that fixes the size of the array to 3, but I can always change the values on the inside. Let's say I want to print out one specific colour from that array. You can see I've put system.out.println colours 1. So that will print out whatever's at position 1, which in this case would be pink because it goes 0, 1, 2. Two-dimensional arrays start to make this a little bit trickier because we now have 2 indexes that we're looking at. Now this can be represented visually as a table. So you can see here that I have got 5 people with 2 test scores, and I've stored the name of the person at index 0, and I've stored their test scores at indexes 1 and 2. Now, because our arrays can only store one data type at a time, and I can't mix strings with integers, what I've decided to do is declare everything as a string, and I can do any relevant casting later as I wish. And if I'm documenting my code, which every programmer should be, with comments, I would be able to put into there that elements 1 and 2 will be integers and require casting. So in OCR exam reference language, you can see this is how it would look. It's very, very similar to as it was before. So here's an empty array, 5 columns, 3 rows. And what's important to know is an array of arrays. So the outer array has 5 spaces in, and then on each inner array has 3 spaces within that. So you can see here, this is me declaring it. So I've got my outer array, so I've only put 2 items in there, but then each of those has 3 elements in. So if I was to look at it like the above example, okay, you can see I've got, this would be element 0, this would be element 1, and then 0, 1, 2. Okay, so you can see how that links to the previous page. Looking at two-dimensional arrays then, in Java, you can see the main difference is that we use a double square bracket rather than just one pair with a comma in between. Apart from that, the example underneath looks exactly the same. It's just that top example that looks slightly different. Right, this is the A-level content now, looking at three-dimensional arrays. If you are part of the GCSE, we are going to demo this in Java itself. If you just hold on, you'll be able to see that there. Right, 3D arrays are very similar to 1 and 2D arrays, but they have 3 indexes or 3 indices rather than 2 or 1. So for this example, I could store a student name, a test they've completed, and the 3 attempts. Now this can be difficult to show visually, but you can usually represent this as a cube or a cuboid. So you can see here an empty array of 5 columns, 3 rows and 3 depth. So you can see here I've put array test scores 5, 3, 3. 5 people, 3 tests, 3 scores. So initializing with declaration of 2 columns, 3 rows and also 3 depth, you can see I've got this here. Now this only shows 1 column with 1 row, but this is my 3 depth. Okay, so I could in fact continue on my array like this to a maximum of 3, for example, if I was to follow the top definition, just like that. So I could have 5 of these, okay, and in each of them is 3 arrays with 3 elements in each. it is very confusing, but when we look at the code, it might clear it up for you. And as always, if you want to leave questions in the comments, you can. I will try my best to answer them. So here is the example in Java. As you can see, I could have gone a little bit further and I could have added another set of curly brackets using the top definition of 533. And there you go. So let's put this into demonstration perspectives and we'll be able to see how it all weaves together. Let's demonstrate how arrays then work in Java. What I've done is I've just imported this java.util.arrays function or class just to be able to actually run our code a little bit simpler and be able to visualize it. Let me just put the files to the side so it just simplifies our layout. So what we're going to do is, we're going to start with one-dimensional arrays. So let's start by actually creating just a blank arrays called names. So let's say we're going to have a string array. I'm going to call it names, and I'm going to make it equal to a new string array of 5 spaces. So I've made a blank array. If I try printing this out, and to print it out, if you just put names, it won't display very well. So let's click run and see what happens. So you see there we've got javalang.string and then just some gobbledygook, and that's all about the memory of where the array is stored. So what we can do is we can use this arrays class to help us. So I can say arrays.toString and put in names. So if we click run now, we should get, move this dialog box, it's trying to be helpful. You can see there, it now shows my array with the 5 empty slots in, and they're all null because there's nothing in there. Now, if I want, I could try adding things to this array. So I could say names 0 equals Tom, for example. I could also do names 2 is equal to Peter. Let me put speech marks around there before I get a lot of errors. There we go. And if I just print this out one more time, there we go, and click run, you will be able to see that some will say null, but 2 of them should be filled in. So you can see I've overwritten Tom and I've overwritten Peter from null. Now, of course, another way that you can do that, and what I will do is I will just comment that out. Also, what you could do is you could say string array names is equal to a new, not equal to new, sorry. And then you can use curly brackets and actually put everyone in there. So I could say Tom, Brenda, Janet, Peter, and Susan. And if I try printing it out now, system.out.println arrays.toString and then names, and then click run, you should see now that I get the exact same, but all 5 are already there. Okay, I can also check the length. So I could do names dot length. Let's click run. Might need curly brackets on the end of there. There you go. So names.length 5. It's been able to see that there's 5 elements there, and it's given me it there. Okay, so that is one-dimensional arrays. So let's have a look at 2D arrays now. So we said this is almost like viewing a table. So just like before, I could have a 2D array just declared like this. So I could have scores equals new int, and let's say 5 people, 3 scores. And that gives me a blank integer array of 5 columns across, 3 rows down. Okay. Now, just because I think it's a little bit easier to show myself, I'm going to show the other way of actually initializing as you declare. So I'm going to have string and then a 2D array, test scores, just like we had in the example. And I'm going to make that equal to, and then what I can do is I'll then have Tom, who scored 50% and then 57%. So this is the exact same as what I did in the example on the slides. So let's then have Brenda, who scored 60 and then 94. And I can keep going and going and going. So we can see that this array is the same as saying int 2 3. Okay, so it's two columns, 3 rows. Okay, and I can print that out and also edit as I wish as well. So what I'll do is, if I do system.out.println, let's say that I want to print out Brenda's row, then what I can do is I can say, right, arrays.toString, and I'm going to put test scores, square brackets 1. So that's going to reference here. We've got 0 and 1. So test scores 1 is this array there. So if I print that out, it should say Brenda 60, 94. There you go. If I want to change her score, so let's say this 60 needs updating, what I could do instead is I could say, right, test scores, and then that was column 1, and then the row that 60 is on is also row 1 because it's 0, 1, 2, and I can make that equal to 88. Now if I do this exact same line again, whoops, you should see that that will then be updated. Sorry, I was getting all muddled up with my mouse there. There you go, so you can see that that's 60 has updated to 88. Right, Next one is 3D arrays, and I know this is probably the hardest one for people to get their head round. So, again, as always, we can declare it like this, and we can have scores equals new int, and we could say, let's say there's 5 people, 3 tests with two attempts. Okay, that would be an example there. Let's write it out as we have been with the previous ones. So we'll say int scores, and we're going to make that equal to. So you know what, we'll do it like we did before. We'll say there's 2 people, Tom and Brenda, 3 tests, 2 scores. So this would then be Tom's row. So Tom took 3 tests out of 10, as in like with that are marked out of 10. So in the first test he scored a 5, and then when he resat he scored 6. In the next test, Tom had scored 9, but then actually when he resat only got 4. And finally scored 6, but then scored 10. So let's have a look at how we could do Brenda's then. So let's say Brenda scored 10 and then 9. She then scored 10 and then 10 again. And finally, the last topic was not her strongest, so she might have got 4 and then a 5. So that's me making that 3-dimensional array. Let's say I want Brenda's first attempt at test number 2. So I would put system.out.println, let's say Brenda's second test first attempt score, and we can concatenate that on, so it's going to be scores, and then Brenda is not element 0, she's element 1. Oops. The second test is also in element 1 of there, so test 1, test 2, test 3. So second test would be element 1. And her first score, whoops, I just deleted something by accident. And the first attempt would then be 0. There we go. So, very confusing, but let's run it. We should get 10. So there, Brenda's second test, first attempt score, 10. Okay? So that's a very simple way of using arrays and 3D arrays. Now, obviously, it does get more complex depending on what else you are going to do. But just for now, we're going to leave that demo there. Now that we've come back from that demonstration, your head might still be very full with all those arrays because it can be very, very difficult. But let's have a look at lists. So let's have a look at what is a list and how does it change compared to an array. So lists are the same as arrays in the fact that they're 0 based, but they are dynamic, which means that the memory needed can grow and shrink as needed. In Java, we use a class called ArrayList from the java.util library, exactly where we got our scanner from previously. If you use Python, or you've come from the Python programming language, then actually you've already used lists before, because Python doesn't actually have arrays, they're all lists. So it's going to be very, very similar to what you've come across before. Now, there is actually no CR exam reference language for this. That's because their language for arrays is very, very similar and shows the exact same. So we're going to jump straight in with the code. So here you are, you can see that I'm using the same example as last time. The only difference here is that you can see that I've got this diamond operator here. Now this might be quite confusing at first, but actually you'll be able to get the gist very quickly. Like with our arrays, we had to declare the type of data that we were using. And in this case, we're using a class which is called ArrayList. But we still want to declare what type of data that list is going to store. So we can use this diamond operator to put inside what data type we would use. Now we can use wrapper classes as well, like integer, byte, character, etc. So with Java, we won't be using those primitive types, we'll be using the wrapper classes that just give them that little bit extra. It's also worth noting that even though I used strings in the example for the arrays, you can actually use any data type you want. You would just change the data type declaration from string to maybe int or char, etc. You can see there that I'm then adding things to my list here with list.add, and then I've put Tom, Brenda, Peter, Janet. I could also remove them, so list.remove. I could find the size, I can do all sorts. Let's have a look at the demonstration and you'll be able to see how this goes together. Let's now have a look at the list example and see how that differs to the array. So, I've already imported it in at the top. So, to declare it, I'm going to go array list string, because I'm going to make a list of strings, names equals new array list, and then we put the empty diamond and then empty brackets. So my array is currently blank. Okay, so let's see what we can do with it now. So we're going to say names.add, and I can put in my string. So we'll go with what we did before. So we've got Tom, names.add, oops, Brenda, names.add, Janet, names.add, Peter, and names.add, Susan. Right. Let's have a go at printing these out. So what I'm going to do first though is I'm just going to import that arrays class that I was using earlier. Because what I'm going to do, just to link it back and make it a bit easier, I'm going to turn it into an array and then actually print it out. So system.out.println, and we're going to say names dot to array, which I'm sure is a valid method. I might be wrong. And then surround all that in arrays.toString. Just like that. So we're going to change names to an array. We're then going to put it into a string so it can be printed out. Let's have a look at how that looks. So it does sometimes take some time to catch up. Oh, I've not called my thing correctly. There we go. let's jump back to what we were doing. That was part of my configuration. Let's try running that again. We should get an array of Tom, Brenda, Janet, Peter, Susan. There we go. Now you can see here that what we've done is that started out with size 0 and we have been able to stretch that and shrink it as and how we've needed to. Let's actually remove someone. Let's do names dot remove, and we'll remove Peter from the list. And then what we'll do is we're going to take that print statement and we're going to print it again. Paste. There we go. Let's run that. And you should see that we should only have 4 elements when it prints out again. There you go. So you can see Peter has been removed and we now only have 4. So you can see the array has actually grown and shrunk. It's not turned to null. It's physically shrunk in size. Okay. Now if you look back when we did iteration, you'll know that you can actually loop through your lists and also arrays. So what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do it on this example. This is a bit of a bonus if you've stayed on throughout this tutorial. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called name array and make it equal to names.toArray. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to loop through an array. Oh, I should have declared what type of data I was using. There we go. I have to do a different type of casting just to make it work a bit nicer. That should work it. There we go. So change that to a string array. So there's different ways that we could do this. We could say for int I is equal to 0, while I is less than name array dot length, and we could do I plus plus, and then we could say system.out.println, and we could say name array I. And what you'll see here is we'll get the names printed out again, but just in order. Oh, maybe not. Oh, I think I've got a bit of an error going on. What we'll do then is we will quickly just add the people's names in, and we'll do it like a proper array. There we go, that'll do. And we'll run it like that. So you should see Tom, Brenda, Peter being printed out one on top of the other. There we go. Tom, Brenda, Peter. There we go. Now this is a very long-winded way of doing that. So you can see we've initialized our counter, given our condition, and we've also given the update. You can also use what we call a for each loop. We could say, well, for the string name in, and we use that with the colon, name array. And what we can do now is we can say system.out.print name, and that will give us the exact same result. And it just lowers down the amount of code we actually have to write. There you go. You can do the exact same with our list. So we could say names. And if we run that again, you should see we'll get this list, but minus Peter. And like I said with files, if you then wanted to do some additional processing, you can do that within the for loop. So there's another example of that being working. So let's go back and we'll have a little review, and then we'll be able to see how everything went. Right, let's review. We've looked at one-dimensional arrays, two-dimensional arrays as part of the GCSE specification. A-level specification, we've looked at 3D arrays and also lists. This can be very, very tricky to get your head around, so have a play around and see what you can do. If you do have any questions or comments, please leave them down below and I will try and answer as best I can.